So hello everybody, welcome to this Pronunciation SIG webinar. We're delighted to have with us today William Acton, Amanda Baker and Michael Burri, who are going to be speaking on haptic pronunciation teaching, neuroscience, praxis and touch. Amanda and Michael met Bill when they were assisting him as in his sorry, I've gone blank. When they were assisting him in his own research at university and started a very deep professional connection, of which you're going to see in action in this presentation. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, allow Bill to start sharing his, and say thank you very much for joining this IATEFL PronSIG webinar.
Testing. We okay? Sound all right?
All good.
Okay, good. Okay, Amanda, take it away.
Thank you. All right, welcome everyone to this presentation on haptic pronunciation teaching. So we've already had a wonderful introduction, but I would just like to stress that the three of us have known each other for nearly 20 years. I'm feeling a little old tonight. Well, tonight in Australia time. So my role here is to give a little bit of structure to the rest of this presentation, to give a bit of a framework for you to see how we're positioning everything else in this presentation, and to kind of give you a bit of an introduction into what haptic pronunciation teaching is. So essentially, haptic is speech, synchronized gesture, and touch. So basically taking kinesthetic and tactile learning and putting it together and then using that to assist and support the teaching of pronunciation. Many teachers already use gestures. Most of us do. But what we've done here is we've provided a system, a systematic way of doing this, so that what we already do naturally, now we've got a system for it, which we'll introduce you to a bit later on in this presentation. So what we do is we use gesture and we map it onto stressed syllables in words or stressed words in much larger chunks of discourse like phrases or sentences. And this is regulated and modulated by touch. We use this also to model pronunciation, features of pronunciation, to give feedback to students, and also to correct pronunciation where we need to, just, whenever we need to in a lesson. This can be applied with any learner population. It doesn't matter whether it's adult learners or children, adolescents. I've used it with a wide range of students myself, and so have the other panelists here. We first proposed this haptic approach to teaching back in 2008 at the New York TESOL convention. But a year prior to that, or actually 2 years prior to that, I was probably the first guinea pig doing it at Georgia State University when I was teaching postgraduate or graduate students, master's students, pronunciation back then. So we've been here since the very beginning doing this. And for the most part, it's relatively easy to learn. Once you get the basics of it, it's quite easy to learn and to use regularly in your teaching. Switch, please. So here's my attempt to provide a bit of structure to everything else we're going to be talking about today. So I'm not going to actually look at all the details of this particular model. It's a model that I've recently written up, and it's been accepted by English Australia Journal and will be published in 2021. So basically what I've proposed here is a coaching model to clear and fluent pronunciation. Now, most of this will be something you've seen before in some form, but essentially what I want to draw your attention to is the toolkit part of this model, which is the pronunciation toolkit. And that's different techniques that take a learner from language awareness to controlled practice into guided practice and then free practice. with the ultimate aim of achieving clear and fluent pronunciation. Now, language awareness, as you know, will include things like explaining a feature pronunciation, modeling it, how to recognize it, and how to discriminate between different ones. Controlled practice, as the name suggests, is a bit more, is teacher controlled for the most part, and that will be production activities, drills, and the students actually using their own voice to identify different features of pronunciation. And then we get into something that's much less teacher controlled, guided practice. And this will be where your negotiation of meaning comes into play, information gaps, etc. And finally, trying to achieve free practice where students can more creatively use language, but use the pronunciation features they've been working on for a period of time into more free communication. So that's a basic overview of the pedagogy behind effective pronunciation teaching. And so mapped onto this is a coaching model. And the coaching model is from Carol Kaufman's perfect model to positive coaching in general psychology. And I'm not going to discuss the entire thing, but essentially just bring your attention to a few of the components that are relevant to this presentation today. So the first one is the physical, biological, and environmental factors that can play a part in how students take to learning pronunciation. Some students will be, their first language may have similar features of pronunciation to English, or they may not. And so those biological features, factors can play a part in learning it. And environmental factors can have an impact as well. How pronunciation is taught at a particular institution, how it's incorporated into the curriculum. And then from here, we also have other factors like relational feelings and effective thinking, and this is from Kaufman's model. So the relationships would be between the student and the teacher, or between student and student, which can have a bit of an impact on how they learn pronunciation in the classroom, whether it's a whole class activity led by the teacher, or it's something that is student-to-student pair work type of activities. Feelings, emotions come into play. Does pronunciation have an impact on a student's perception of their own self-identity? That can have a role to play here as well. And then effective thinking, which is more about the cognitive factors, how they understand pronunciation or a feature of pronunciation, for example. And so all of this together, it feeds back on each other, and they switch back and forth between different parts, the pedagogy, the coaching, and all of this is to achieve ultimately, over time, clear and fluent pronunciation. Switch, please. And so this basically brings me into the main parts of today's presentation. So the haptic pronunciation teacher, which will be discussed in the second half of this presentation, draws on to a certain extent the different techniques of pronunciation. It's the haptic is incorporated or embedded in this entire spectrum, from language awareness to controlled practice, guided practice, free practice, and it's incorporated into all of that. And then the neuroscience, which Mike will be discussing, is mapped onto the coaching model in some ways, the physical, biological, environmental factors, as well as the relational feelings and effective thinking factors. Next slide, please. So this then brings me into Mike's part, and he's going to talk a bit about the neuroscience. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Amanda. Can you hear me? All good? Yeah, wonderful. So I'll be talking about neuroscience, and as you know, neuroscience is a huge area. So, and I got 10 minutes to cover it all. That means basically we're going to just talk about a few principles that are relevant to this model and also underpin haptics. And some of you are familiar with some of these principles, and some of you may not. So we'll just we got about 10 minutes, but generally there's the understanding now that the brain is not a passive organ. The brain is in fact a social organ. And this is if you want to know more about this, Cosolino's work is just really, it's a great read. And I suggest you sign out this book if you can, the 2013 book, but the 2006 references here too is in the reference list. But basically the brain needs social interaction to function. And what this means in the classroom is that then, of course, we need social discovery-driven activities and also group work where students can interact with each other. And you can see the link here to what Amanda just said, to the coaching model, right? There needs to be interpersonal contact for neurons to fire and to make new connections, basically, and to consolidate existing pathways in the brain, which ultimately is learning. But what we also know is that stress and negative emotions impede learning. So the teacher has a great impact on the students, and it's of utmost important that the teacher creates a positive learning environment. From a pronunciation point of view, neuroscience offers interesting insights into how the brain processes suprasegmentals, prosody, like how the brain processes new and old information. And if you know what prominence is, we use prominence in English to communicate meaning. And from a neuroscientific point of view, this is very relevant. But the connection between neuroscience and pronunciation is really not a whole lot discussed in our field. That's a shortcoming. Next slide. Good. So from neuroscience, we move on to, excuse the pun, to movement. And that's another area that's very relevant, as you'll see in a minute here when Bill takes over. But basically movement helps reduce stress, right? When you go for a run, you're stressed, you go for a run, you feel better because the brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter, which in turn then increases pleasure and satisfaction. It also increases cognitive functioning. And that the movement really results in increased blood flow that then carries away neurotoxins, stuff that we don't want to have in the brain, and moves it out. And also when we move, of course, the brain receives signals to pay attention and learn, right? It contributes to the birth of new neurons. You might be familiar with the term plasticity in the hippocampus area. Movement is very important because it leads to this generally, and mainstream education particularly, there's quite a lot of scholars that say movement leads to a more effective learning and retention of new content. But in education, and I think in language teaching too, cognitive tasks and kinesthetic activities are not connected well, to be diplomatic. And that's a shame because, as many of you know, as Underhill says, pronunciation is a kinesthetic activity. So we need to make that bridge. It's very important. Next slide, please. So movements and then gestures. Amanda, I think she mentioned gesture, I'm not sure, but we'll definitely talk about it when Will shows some of his, or does his demonstration. But gestures lower students, the load on students, language learners' working memory. And at the same time, they enhance or facilitate the recall of newly learned information or content. In other words, if you add a gesture, students may help recall information or vocabulary, for example, that they've learned previously. Also, gestures facilitate listening comprehension. Listening with your eyes, for example, or kinesthetic listening are now interesting concepts here that I think starting to appear in the literature. So basically, listening is, again, not a passive activity, but it goes with gestures and facilitate a great deal, right? If you can't make yourself understood, what do? You use gestures. At least I do. When I was in Japan, I probably used more gestures than language. But, also, gestures facilitate or the production of suprasegmental features, and second language learners' perception of vowel length, right? So if students have a difficult time distinguishing between E and I, gestures may facilitate that perception between the difference of these, between I and E. But very importantly, unexpected or random gestures may in fact hinder learning. That's a very important part, because the visual impact generally distracts or maybe even overwrites other modalities. So random gestures are detrimental, and you'll see that in haptics we use systematic gestures. That's very important, and touch, of course, too. So random gestures, keep that in mind. Random gestures may not actually facilitate anything. Okay, next one is touch. The skin is the largest organ, and an adult skin weighs about 4 kilos. And it's the most common and most powerful sense for us humans to interact with the physical environment, right? The skin and its receptor system sends information to the brain through touch. So when you say you leave the stove on and you touch a hot plate, you'll notice that instantaneously, as my son tells me. Touch enhances learning and produces detailed and lasting memory. So there seems to be a connection between touch, learning, and memory. That's a very important point that we'll come back to as well. And touch appears to complement movement and gestures in meaning, in creation of meaning. And it makes learning more memorable. Home has a wonderful piece in TESOL Quarterly on embodiment. That's a must read for us language teachers. Touch also appears to increase learner confidence more effectively than the visual domain, particularly in ambiguous phonological situations, such as the difference between E and A, okay, those two diphthongs. If you add touch there, learners appear to be able to distinguish between those more clearly. But, and in red down here, touch is almost non-existent in higher education, let alone in pronunciation instruction. I've seen 2 articles lately on clapping. So there's a bit of a touch component there. And Bill might have time to talk about this a little bit later on. But essentially, touch is really an area that's not well explored in language teaching and pronunciation. All right, next slide, please. And I think that's it for me. And I'm going to hand over to Bill, and he's going to do he's going to have some fun.
We are going to have some fun, it turns out. Just going back to this model. I mean, what Mike and Amanda are trying to do here is kind of pull together from our perspective as well a more holistic model of what pronunciation teaching is about. And again, in this webinar, we're kind of building from the bottom up. We're going to look at sort of a bottom up approach to some of this from the physical and kinesthetic perspective. I just a couple of things Mike said I have to argue with. You know, one of what he cited a study said that pronunciation is kinesthetic. You know, that it's part of it. And I think that's been a lot of our problem in teaching pronunciation, that we've seen it is so separate. And that it's a cognitive and an embodied process in itself, the way it goes. So anyway, and the other thing, the comment Mike made, really interesting, which I was glad to hear him kind of comment on, is the idea of how sensitive touch and movement as well are to the visual field. And we're going to talk about that a bit in the demonstration. But there are any number of reasons. In fact, I'm fascinated by this. Is the last piece of research there, just questioning why is touch not used more in education in general. I've got a lot of ideas on that, and in the discussion, if you'd like to come back to it, be happy to get to that. Okay, so let's just do this is kind of a little review of kind of what Amanda said, elaborate a bit on this. So this haptic pronunciation teaching, kind of what is this? As Amanda said, it is basically using gesture and touch systematically in pronunciation work and other things as well, which we're going to talk about in a bit. But our model, our haptic pronunciation teaching model, our pedagogical model, always begins with this first one, the embodied class context. And that means that either you are in a class where everybody's body is with it, they're relaxed, they're into it, where they can kind of sync and move together, or if everybody is just got off the subway or whatever, wherever they are, for our haptic pronunciation work, we have a number of warm-ups that we do, easy warm-ups. I'm going to show you one to kind of get people into that, to sort of like body activation, I think is a word we would use for it. So that's first thing. Second thing is, as Amanda said, it involves touch. And what we do, in terms of teaching, our teaching approach to this is we do an explicit lesson. We teach them one of these little gestural complexes, and it doesn't take long. We call them a pedagogical movement pattern, PMP. And we can do it in class, we can do it out of class, we can do it online, and many ways to do that. And again, we have, when we're finished the discussion period, we can point you at some places you can see those and get some ideas of what those look like. And then the idea is that given that, once you have this tool to work within, you can do, as Amanda said, modeling, feedback, and correction as it happens in class, sometimes planned, sometimes less planned. But it's particularly good from that perspective. And I would say too, just to kind of get ahead of the story here in terms of Amanda's comment about the relational side of it, when people are, when the students have got the system and they're working with it, it's fun. And there's a lot of laughter, nervous laughter, some of it certainly, but there's a relaxed kind of anticipation of correction as value. It's something that is looked forward to, and it's not stressful, and we have ways of kind of working around that. And the last thing is this haptic homework and practice. Within our system, in our haptic pronunciation teaching system, homework is critical. So but they've been given this gestural pattern that they can work with, if they're working on vocabulary or whatever, sounds or whatever. So it gives them a more prescribed and a more effective, some ways, an easier way for you to decide exactly what they have to do for homework. Because generally it follows from things that come up in class that they do there. All right, now, so that's basic haptic pronunciation teaching. Now what we're going to talk about a little bit here is that kind of where we're headed. Well, at least I'm going there. I'm not sure Mike, I think Mike and Amanda are going to come with me. But here's kind of how we see it developing. So I'm going to show you the basic system, and I'm also going to show you kind of where we see this evolve, what it evolves to. And it evolves to something that kind of comes back to what Amanda's model is, and that the model that she gave us, this overall model that brings in more features into teaching pronunciation. So we begin with, you can see there's A, B, C, D, E there. A, B, D, and E are just like the general model I just mentioned. What's different to some extent is E and C, what we call embodied content. And what really is going on here, and I'm going to unpack this for you quickly in a minute, that these PMPs, these pedagogical movement patterns, we embed them in contact. I can't remember what Amanda word, you use the word absorbed in or something, embody, well, embody them. So basically we're working with the teaching materials that for listening or speaking or reading or writing, the text materials you have in front of you. And again, our students often have to work with our graduate students, the people we train. More and more now, they're given a book they have to use, and they have no choice, and they have a tight curriculum. And how can you possibly do pronunciation in that context? And that's kind of what inspired this, to be honest with you. So many of my teachers say, I got no time. What can I do? For a while, we were calling it covert haptic pronunciation teaching, sneaking it in. And now we figured out a way to make it more organic as it fits in. So the PMPs, the idea here is this: we use teaching content and we put the haptic work into it, embed the content. And so the purpose, the second bullet there, purpose is to enhance content. As Mike was talking about, how gesture particularly helps with memory, with memorization, but also gesture helps in learning and concentration and focus. It does a lot of things to help you learn content, vocabulary, a story, things that you're working on. But you can also use it for pronunciation. very intentionally. I'm going to show you how to do that in just a minute. So let's get that embodied content. Let's unpack that a little bit more. What does that mean? So you got a story in class. You want to work with it. What do you do? Well, here are the steps that how we think it through. First thing we do, we call it haptic mapping. In fact, Amanda mentioned that, the mapping of haptic. I'll show you how to do that in just a minute, this demonstration. Then the second thing we do is, once we've done that, then we've got this story or a piece of a story or phrases from a story. And then with that, what we're going to try to use expressiveness and intelligibility and focus, using the gestures to focus on the content so they can both learn it and they can remember it, is the concept. And that's one of the research on gesture is just unequivocal of the power of gesture to do that. The problem is, I'll talk about, there are some problems. I'll talk about those in a minute as well, kind of how that plays out. In fact, a lot of this came out of an article that, book chapter, I think it's in the references, I'm not sure, we'll have to look, that Mike and Amanda and I did on using one of these PMPs for learning vocabulary. In fact, what we discovered early on is that we were doing pronunciation, but these little gestures and things we do are terrific when you want somebody to remember a vocabulary or phrase, or especially an idiom. So that kind of came out naturally, and now it's become almost the centerpiece of how we think about what we're doing here. And finally, this content as a platform for pronunciation work. So in other words, we're going to try and use the classroom materials that we have already. I mean, we can always bring in extra pronunciation drills and things, but the idea is that content gives us practice material. We can practice with the material, and the students see it as more relevant, obviously, because it's right within it. And it's also, as always, I mean, teaching must be in context, as Amanda said. And again, same thing for modeling, feedback, and correction if you're working with pronunciation work. Okay, now I'm going to, for those of you who are in other time zones, it's the middle of the night here for me. And Mike and Amanda insisted that I record this and play it rather than try and do it impromptu. So that's probably a good idea. Anyway, so I'm going to play a 10-minute video of the process. And you can kind of get that. Then we'll stop and we'll have time for discussion afterwards. So haptic mapping, what does that mean? Okay, we got a story or something we're working on in class, and the first thing we do is we identify the rhythm groups. We identify the stress syllables and rhythm groups. And then if it's a sentence, maybe you got 4 or 5 rhythm groups. We have to just figure out which rhythm group has main stress. And then we select a PMP, pedagogical movement pattern, and I'll show you how to do that. The one I'm going to demonstrate is, well, actually I'm going to demonstrate 3 or 4 of them, but some sort of a gestural pattern to help you remember the stuff, right? And that gesture will do a lot of things, and we'll talk about that in a minute. And then once you figure that out, then, and the last phase is, the last arrow there is important. You sync it with the text. What that means is you speak it out loud. You repeat it out loud, and there are lots of ways to do this. You can do it together with students. You can do it to demonstrate it for them. They can do it. You can do it. They can move with you while you speak. All kinds of ways that you sync both the language to the text and you to the students. So that syncing, again, that's that syncing feeling. Oh, sorry, bad pun, sorry. Anyway, but when we talked about the relational side of it, there's a relational part that haptic brings in. When you get people dancing together with you and moving with you, that is almost an operational definition of empathy. In many ways it is. When 2 people are really clicking, they move together and that sort of thing. The sentence I will use is a very famous one. Quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. We should do a little poll and see how many people learn touch typing using that sentence. All right, so enough of this. I'm almost finished talking here. I'll turn on the video and let you watch the video in a minute. So we're going to do of those PMPs I mentioned, right? There's about 24 of them total, maybe a dozen of the primary ones, and then each one of those has various levels of refinement that you can get into. I'm going to demonstrate the butterfly, which is a little thing like this, the fight club, Tai Chi PMP, one called the touchy-namis, touching, it's a touching wave, like that comes from Japan, touching and a wave, touchy-nami. Then I'll show you how to do a little bit with vowels and consonants. In fact, I'll use one of the examples Mike gave of the that sort of thing. and I'll do that. And again, I'll use the quick brown fox jumping over the lazy dog. All right, so fasten your seatbelts. Here comes the video. And I promise you, this is better than me trying to do it live. Handsome guy, huh? Here we go.
So I will be demonstrating this, but to really get it, to be embodied, you must do it along with me.
Video's
So it
not showing,
involves your
It's not showing?
welcome to Haptic World. To begin,
It's not
we
showing?
need to do a little demonstration.
Is the video showing?
No, so you haven't changed the view on the display. So
Oh, okay. Okay, let me go back to it. Just a second, I'll go back and do that again. Sorry, gang. Get that.
we can't
There
wait
he
to
is.
see it.
Okay,
Bill.
there he is. We good now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay. Sorry about that. This was worth waiting for. I promise you. Okay, here we go.
It is a portmanteau of welcome to Haptic World.
Here we go.
To begin, we need to do a little demonstration. That is a portmanteau of demonstration and participation. So I will be demonstrating this, but to really get it, to be embodied, you must do it along with me, so it involves your participation. So let's begin with a little warm-up. Haptic pronunciation teaching, a good part of it involves the systematic use of the visual field. So let's do a little warm-up, and we're going to use the compass as sort of our central organizing feature, which we do in our work, just to give students kind of a perspective on how much of the visual field we will be engaging, we will be placing sounds and processes in that visual field. So do this with me, please. Just take your right hand. We'll go to do north with me. North. Good. North again on northeast. 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 Now go east with me. East. East. Let's go down to southeast. Southeast. Good. You're doing well. Southeast. South. 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 Other hand. South. South. Now southwest. 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 Now west. 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 Northwest. 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 And finally north. 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 Outstanding. Okay, now this is an abbreviated warm-up, so we're going to do one more thing. What we're going to do is we're going to do a little ooh-ah, right? And that ooh-ah will go from out here in front to northeast, northwest, to east-west, and from here down to southeast, southwest. Sort of a ooh-ah, ooh-ah, wah, like that. Ready? Here we go. Ready? Wah. Good. One more time. Wah. East-west. Wah. Wah. Finally, southeast, southwest. Wah. Wah. All right. Now, like I said, when I briefed you on kind of what I'm going to do, we're going to imagine that we're we've come into a story or some kind of a narrative. Maybe it's a sentence that it's code for the revolution starts today, something like that, right? So it's the quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog, right? Quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So standard protocol here, kind of the way we do that, so it's always rhythm first. So we would identify the rhythm groups. So quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So there we've identified for this instance, we're going to just use 3 rhythm groups. In each rhythm group, again for the students, we identify the stressed syllable. So it would be quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. Now we've identified the most important syllables in each of those rhythm groups. Now the way we do that, one of the techniques we use, one of the protocols, the PMPs, we call it, it's called the butterfly. So you put your left hand up here and your right hand down here, something like this. The quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So this unstressed syllables down here, stressed syllables up here. So that way we're getting them to syllables within a rhythm group. If they need that kind of practice, if you have Japanese students or something, that sort of thing might be very helpful for them. But let's put it in the context of the sentence then. We've got 3 rhythm groups, right? And the main stress is in the in dog, right? So do something. For example, we could do it this way. Be the quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So strong stress on that rhythm up there, something like that. Okay, so that would be a way to work within the structure of the sentence, doing a little bit on rhythm and those sort of things. But it's also generating some energy, some expressiveness onto that phrase. Now, for example, we might want to put more excitement into it, more energy into it, or that would be kind of our content focus. But from the other perspective, we might want to work more on helping the students put more stress on the stress syllables in rhythm groups. So we have something called the Fight Club, which we do that with. So if you imagine that you have a piece of paper or a ball in your hand, or just squeeze your hand so that your fingernails come into your palm. So something like quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So again, just gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. Now all we're doing here with the Fight Club is stressing the stress syllable. We could also do it so that we would actually do the syllables as well, just like we did the butterfly. Quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So you can see I'm doing the unstressed syllables back here, stressed syllables out here. And finally, with the Fight Club, if we thought it was important that they get the sense of where the sentence stress is again, it'd be something like, quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. Quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. Adding some additional touch, haptic engagement on the stress syllable in the sentence. Now, that puts a lot of energy and drive and excitement perhaps into this key sentence, this little story or drama we're doing. But if we wanted to back off on that, if we were more interested in a sentence that had more fluidity and a kind of a flowing sense to it, we would use something called the Tai Chi. Now here, I'll demonstrate. Quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So just kind of in a circle like that. I can't remember the name of that Tai Chi move, but something like that. So the quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. Again, for some students developing just the feeling of fluency, and again, depending on what the semantics or the narrative required of that sentence, you can add those kind of emotional and phonological features on top of it. So, let's say that we decided we'd like to do, in terms of that emotional or that sort of rise and fall of the melody, we'd like to emphasize, for some reason, we want to emphasize the colors, right? The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Excuse me. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. The feature talking about the features of the animal, the brown fox and the lazy dog, right? The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. And what is that? That is sort of embodying the rise-fall intonation using this kind of protocol where we go up on it and come back down. So it's brown and lazy, right? Same thing. So there we're working on intonation, certainly, but also it could be just the emotional or the even the discourse marking of particular words when you have contrastive stress or some sort of a discourse process that's focusing onto one word. Now, so those are just general things that could serve both for expressiveness and making content more memorable, but also have sort of a pronunciation side to it. Here's one that's a little bit more specific. We have one called the segmental handoff. And that's when we've got a passage or something, and the students have been having difficulty, let's say, with a high front tense and high front lax vowels, right? So let's say it's between I and E, that one, that sort of thing. So how would we do that? How would we represent that haptically? Well, I'll demonstrate that. The lax vowel is just simply a tap. I, with a middle finger tapping the center of your hand here. I, like that. Got that? I. The tense vowel, or the tense vowel with a light off glide, particularly like in American and some Canadian dialects, is more like E. So it's I, E. So be something like the quick vowel, the quick vowel. the quick fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick fox jumped over the lazy dog, the E. So I and E. So you can see how we could do that. Again, whenever we do that though, not whenever, but often, when we pull something out of context like that and we play with it a little bit, we often try to put it back in. We want to get it back in. And how do we do that? Well, the Tai Chi is a great way to do that, even if you focused on those vowels. So the quick fox jumped over the lazy dog. Quick fox jumped over the lazy dog. Now, that's vowels. Same thing could happen with consonants. If you're working on something and you decide to just kind of step back here in the middle of this story and you want to just give them a little work on the TH sound, for example. Well, we have a PMP, a pedagogical movement pattern that does that. And it ends, I'm not going to show you the whole protocol here, it's a little bit tricky, but it ends with having a stick or maybe even your finger up against, pushing tightly against your lips and your tongue coming out to touch it lightly. Like that. Right? So in this one, for example, it would be the quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So again, just the stick is just keying, getting the tongue back out to touch the stick lightly on the and those two thes. Again, like we did with vowels, we do the same kind of process. We would bring it back in, probably with using the Tai. Could you use the Fight Club? But probably the Tai Chi. The quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. So the is out here, right? The quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick gray fox jumped over the lazy dog. Even my.
We back to the PowerPoint, okay? Still not? Okay.
No, not yet.
Okay. Sorry again, gotta do that again. We got the PowerPoint now?
Yeah.
I told you this time of the night it's gonna be a problem, but I got through the video all right, that was good. Okay, let's go. Got a little bit more here before we open up for discussion. So where do we land with this? I'll just kind of all come together here. I hope the demonstration at least gave you a sense of, and if you were doing it with me, even a better sense of how this kind of operates. And kind of over the last 20 years or so, as Mike and Amanda and I and our colleagues and students have developed this sort of thing, just the set of gestures to us is a very natural thing that, and mapping them onto a story or something is very straightforward for us. I know it sounds kind of new to you in principle, but I think I can get the general idea of it. So from a neuroscientific basis, as Mike brought it in, the power of gesture in terms of memory and in terms of brain activation in learning, what those sorts of things do, and the regulatory and moderating power of touch, very, very important. And so for us, for example, is what touch brought into the whole picture was the idea of controlling gesture. And I'll talk about that in just a minute, but very, very important. Again, in principle, I don't even recommend people use a lot of gesture in class, and I'll talk about that in just a second, why not. What Amanda's work does is kind of bring together there's an interpersonal side to this that's always fascinated us, that how people tend to get along when they start doing this kind of work and the bodies are dancing together in class. It's a dance, that's what it is, right? And this begins to, and this coaching framework gives you sort of a principled way a staged way of looking at how those kind of relationships develop relative to intervention. It's a very nice picture that Amanda draws with her article. I recommend that very much. And finally, the basic haptic and the AHP, that's the Acton Haptic Pronunciation stuff I'm doing. The basic haptic stuff gives you the tools, the gestural patterns that you can apply to teaching pronunciation, modeling and correction, those sorts of things. And then my work, kind of where I see my work going is almost to like a discourse perspective. trying, and we've had a lot of action research projects of teachers, poor teachers, who taught pronunciation covertly. And a lot of this has come out of their work and the sort of things they've done. So again, and finally, why haptic? This is a really important one, which I kind of alluded to a moment ago. It's very student-centered, not teacher-centered. The problem with using gesture in class is, on the one hand, if you have a great relationship with your students, and it's fun in class, and the gestures create teachable moments, and do all those kinds of things, but it's not something the students can use as homework. And for students who aren't from cultures, who are not as gesticular, or even for individual teachers, the one things we've learned with haptic pronunciation teacher training, that there's a certain percentage of people who don't feel comfortable doing this. It means standing up in front of class and having people look at your body as you're moving your body. That doesn't work personally and culturally in a lot of ways, but we've got videos that can do it for you, can do some things or ways to do this. But it gives a system so that the students can practice at home because they've worked on it on these very controlled gestures like I showed you with touch, and they can do it. And finally, the why haptic, that initially the voice controls movement. And basically we're linking our speech to movement, and that's relatively easy to do. So when you're looking at a written text, you can kind of coordinate things like that, or even in speaking, you can do it later. But what happens, in fact, I think where a lot of this is moving toward in general in the field is that it's truly haptic. And what really, the technology of haptic means that the machine pushes back. And essentially what happens is the body begins to control the voice. In fact, I'm sure you've watched a lot of public speakers who, Bill Acton included, whose hands are kind of controlling his speech. They're regulating the number of words I can say before my hands come back around. I like that. But ultimately, this is moving toward a much richer use of the body in general, the physicality of the body in language teaching and that sort of thing. So, how are we doing? Right on schedule? Looks like we've got all kinds of questions, and Amanda and Mike will be glad to take your questions. So please.
Thanks so much for that, Bill. That was super. Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma. I'm one half of PronSIG's coordinator team alongside Adam Scott. And I'm going to give our three fantastic speakers some of the questions that you sent in. Excuse me. So going back to the beginning of the session, and for any of the speakers, do feel free to give your answer or to jump in. So Brenda Martinez Mendoza has asked, could you please elaborate on the ideas that you say that you've heard about regarding touch, why touch is not a big part of teaching?
Mike, you want to take that first? I can do it as well, but you want to respond to that first?
Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you one reason. One reason is we can't touch each other anymore in class, right? With COVID, we got to stay 6 meters away? No, 6 feet away. 6 feet away, right? And that's one thing. Another thing is that I used to do all kinds of things with touch, and now we're really concerned about saliva, and there's all sorts of things that with even touching around the mouth. We use sticks, we use popsicle sticks, sort of things like that. So there's that level, just practically in terms of how the culture has changed. Used to be, as a pronunciation teacher, I could touch a student's face. In fact, I'm trained in speech pathology. I have kind of a license. I could actually touch students. But broadly speaking, that touch is, what's the word? I would say it is it's out of our awareness is what I would say. And it is something that when we, for example, if you are involved in special education, special needs and all sorts of things with children, touch is enormous with them. So in educating them, they learn through touch, so many of them. And of course, if you've worked with visually challenged, the blind, touch is massive in terms of their tactile abilities. But I think in terms of us working in, again, I got another example here. I have a student who is working with fashion in the fashion industry, working with ESL in the fashion industry. Touch was enormous. they work on touch all the time because fashion is all about touch. So it's more, so there are areas, same thing within mechanics. Touch is big. I just bought a new torque wrench today, as a matter of fact, right? Torque. So for them, all kinds of discussion of touch and movement and pressure, those sort of things are central. So it's not that there are areas of the culture where touch is critical to people learning their job, that they do it. In cooking, I'm told, touch is a big part of it. What it feels like, all those sorts of things, and the language that plays around cooking. So I think they're talking in general terms about like just general ESL teaching. There just isn't, what would we use it for other than haptic, I guess is what I'm saying. I mean, I think, but one other thing I would say too is that even we are sensitive now to the touch of things around us. So there's a whole new awareness of even of what surfaces feel like and all those things. So we're becoming more tactile from that perspective as well. So anyway, sorry, that's a kind of a crazy answer, but my point is that in a lot of kinds of English for special purposes work, touch is features, and touch, the variability of touch and those things are there as well. So anyway.
Fantastic.
Sorry, that was a little bit random, but it's a big, all kinds of applications of touch in different on-the-job training. So, okay.
Great. Okay, our next question comes from Kamil, and they've asked, is rap music part of haptic pronunciation teaching? Not all teachers are ready to embody actions, so can watching or listening to others be a way out?
I can answer all these. Amanda or Mike, would you like to respond to that?
Well, the videos you alluded to, I mean, you definitely can work with the videos that are available, particularly if, you know, my graduate students, when they feel a bit or they lack a bit of confidence initially, the videos they can play in the classroom. I also have one of my graduate students, she used rap music with some of her junior high school students in Japan. The problem is, I'm not sure what Bill and Amanda think about this, but I just felt the rhythm of the rap music is not, you know, that's not how we talk normally. So I'm a bit hesitant. It gets the students excited, maybe a bit too much, but from a discourse point of view, what Bill was talking about in the video, you know, with prominence and that haptic overlay, I'm not 100% sold on this idea.
Yeah, I would agree with Mike.
I would say that that's a really good question though. I remember one of the first principle was the embodied context. And if you got students whose bodies are really stiff and are used to sitting in chairs, playing rap music, just even playing them, have them watch it and sing along with it, I'm for that 100%.
Yeah.
Because
okay.
Haptic doesn't work unless you can get the bodies to sync with you. And that kind of sort of thing from that perspective, not from a standpoint of just learning patterns or anything like that, what Mike said. So yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I love dancing too, so.
Amanda, would you like to make a comment on that?
I was just going to add that like initially rap music could get them in the mood, especially if they're a bit hesitant to actually engage in something that's quite different than what they're used to. So you could use rap to kind of get them used to the idea, and then you would want to eventually move away from the rap music so that you can actually, because it's not natural speech, so you want to move away from it eventually. But as an initial thing, it would be quite helpful to kind of get them in the mood because it's exciting. And
what Amanda said is key. It's critical. What Amanda just said, it is moving them away from it. The difference with what we're doing, our stuff done right. Again, not me. Okay, this is me. I'm jumping all. I gesture all over the place. But this is designed for the teacher who's not like that. These are very controlled gestures. You saw them in my demonstration. I was even exaggerating them much more than they need to be. They can be very limited gestures, very limited gestural field. They can be. So the idea of the whole haptic system is touch. Touch is critical here. Touch controls gesture. And touch makes it so the student can do it again. They can repeat it. And touch makes it so you can teach people to use the gesture. Without touch, you can't do it. It won't work. You can't train people. Again, my experience of 5 years in the field, you really can't teach people to use gesture very well. It's so uncontrollable. And particularly if you got a class that's excited or if they're not excited, you can't use affect. You can't use that kind of thing to get them into the process. But many times these haptic things, they can do it, even if they do it on autopilot, it's okay. Okay, it's a yes set. It's very important in hypnosis and everything else. If you can get the students even to do that, if that's all, you got them. You've hooked them. All you need is one tap, and they're in to connect up with it. So anyway.
Okay, great. Our next question comes from Christina, who's contacted us on the Facebook page. She's been watching live on Facebook. And Christine has asked, does the success of haptic vary on the learners' profiles, for example, their age or language level?
We, as Amanda said, I think Amanda commented, we've done this from anywhere from preschool to 70-year-olds with fossilized pronunciation. What is this? This is just pronunciation teaching with an overlay. In fact, for a while we were calling it a la haptic, like a la mode. It's just like, for a while we thought of it just kind of laying it on top of. We just use drills, we use repetition, and as Amanda said, we use control practice. All those things. Those are part of it. But this is kind of, I was going to say supercharging it. That's not the right word. It's sort of infiltrate. In fact, for a while I was using a virus metaphor, but that doesn't work right now. That was a great idea. It doesn't work. But it's getting into the system and controlling the system and focusing the system and moderating it, I think, in a lot of ways. So
Okay.
Anyway, I know in fact, I love working with kids. With children, you don't have to teach them. You just do it and they follow you. Right. With 70-year-olds, you have to practice. You have to show them where their hands go, and just really slow. But and again, and many teachers that I've trained over the years, they just use it in modeling themselves. They don't even ask the students to do it. And what you see is, of course, the students start doing it with you. Don't even say a word, just do it. The students mirror neurons. Mike didn't mention that. That's part of the neuroscience stuff. The mirror neurons in the brain. If people are like you and you're connected and you do those things, they're doing right along with you. At least their upper body will move with you, even if their hands don't, as they connect with it. So,
great. Okay, another question from our Facebook stream from Stella. She said, I find this topic amazing. I've tried movement, ludic activities. I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure you do, like games and the like to teach pronunciation. But when it comes to fluency, my students cannot control the phonological features they acquire through guided practice. What type of fluency practice do you suggest in keeping with this method?
Merlot. Chardonnay. The Tai Chi is called the Tai Chi Fluency Protocol, right? You can see what we did with it, right? We focus on it and then we go back, we do it like that. And we have a number of things like that where the thing is you got to go, you have to have things where they can speak freely, of course. Free conversation, that has to be there. I mean, the other principle for us in haptic work is that generally, haptic is social. It is a social function, and pronunciation teaching in general, from our perspective, works with our quorum level for pronunciation teaching is 6 people minimum. So, but you have to do pronunciation socially. It's got to be in a social construct process, right? So, from standpoint of fluency, just one more thing I would say too is that if you have a way of well, one of the things we do is we have them tell stories that are events. So not describing things. We don't have to do fluency. You have to have stories that they can visualize, that they have seen, or that are a coherent story. Because if you can get them into a coherent story, their fluency just ramps, right? But if you get them to try to describe a picture or something, then they're cognitively going all over the place. But in terms of pronunciation teaching, great stories that they personal experiences of theirs that they can recall and present orally are probably the prime property, the prime venue in many ways for that kind of speaking fluency instruction. And then maybe they would, in fact, students get so good at, they can do the Tai Chi while they're talking, while they're telling the story. They can do the Tai Chi PMP as they're telling the story. Well, the other day, I went to the store and guess what I found in the parking lot, right? That's a great trick, the little Tai Chi movement. So again, and it doesn't have to be the one we do. Again, we just gave you examples of the kinds of, we have many different ways of gesturally embodying a process or a feeling or a response. That's all this is. It's just, again, the person who probably influenced me most in this field was named Arthur Lesak, and he was a great voice trainer, and his basic principle was train the body first. Train the body, and then the voice will come along with it. And the body will help you train the voice.
Fascinating, absolutely brilliant. Okay, next question comes from Paula Villablanca, and Paula has asked, how do you think this, and this can maybe come from your experience of working with different age groups again, to the three of you. She's asked how the method could be applied with teenagers and adult learners who are often reluctant to do these types of activities.
That's a good question. And I'll take the first stab here, because what we did a few years ago, we did use a couple of the butterfly that Bill showed and the Fight Club we used with 8 different classes of migrants and refugees in an English language program here. And some of them were non-literate students, so pre-literacy students in any language. And some of them were quite advanced. So we had a great range of students, but we never forced anybody to do this. It was very interesting because I taught all 8 classes, or 8, and then Amanda taught 4. But because we never forced anybody to do this, it was a sort of a very relaxed environment. But the students that were reluctant initially saw how much fun they had the rest of the class. And then about 2 weeks into it, they started just joined naturally. Had I forced them, I'm pretty sure they would have probably stopped coming. But because it was a low pressure situation, a fun environment, again, it goes back to what Bill said, it's very much that neuroscientific coaching framework too. All these elements brought together, it worked beautifully. It was a lot of fun.
And let me add to what Mike said. Go ahead, Amanda, go ahead.
I was just going to say the fun factor is huge. It relaxed the class. Some of them initially, they sat there, just looked at us, didn't want to do it. But within 2 weeks, there wasn't a single student, regardless of their cultural background, who wasn't participating. And in many cases, they were laughing while trying to do it. And they were very engaged in learning the pronunciation features we were focusing on.
And in terms of what's going on in the classroom, let me give you a simple example. Let's say you had 12 vocabulary words or phrases or something like that. And how would you be teaching it? Well, what you're doing is maybe you'd be using the butterfly on all of them. And what would happen is everybody in the class would just do it together. So in fact, one of our principles is do that. For example, a student made a mistake or something, just one student or something, and you decided, let's just help that student with it. I'll use a butterfly for this one. So please do this with me, please do this with me. Like that. That's off the charts, for example, right? That's the idiom. So the student, you and the student together would say it, and your voice would just go over the student. So the student doesn't even have to say it. But we don't do repeat after me ever, right? Well, you might later, but generally it's do it. Let's do it together. We do it. We don't say it, right? That's off the charts, or that's off the charts, or that's off the charts, or that's off the charts, whatever. Anyway, lots of ways we could do it, but that's what we mean. We're in-class practice is that kind of thing. When they're being trained in it, they're all doing it together. They're all using kind of the same phrases. Or if they're doing a story, everybody kind of picks it up, or maybe they don't. Maybe some do, some don't. But again, once their bodies have done this, actually, as long as you do it, their bodies get it, right? They don't even have to move along with it. But they will. I mean, again, if you have it goes back to relationship. All this is relationship, right? You know, if you have that coaching, the kind of affective and kind of relational thing with your student, they move with you, and they're going to go along with it, and they're going to trust you. You know, I think going back to touch and gesture in general, there's an element of trust here, because this is risk taking. This is like getting people to take some risks, you know, with moving their bodies in public and all those kinds of things, that they got to trust you, that you're not going to embarrass them, and it's going to be done. And in fact, you set up the class so that people can't see each other. If you know you got people who are, you know, they are shy, you put them in a place where they can move and they can gesture with you, but other people can't see them. Right. So in that sense, it is kind of teacher-centered, at least beginning. But later on, when corrections happen, like a student will make an error or something, and somebody all the way across the room goes, you know, goes, got it, right? They signal across the room, just like in sign language, to what the correct version was. So that's kind of the relational environment that sets up once you kind of get doing this. There are a lot of really interesting pronunciation systems that use sign language. Use sign systems, they're great. And so we have, ours kind of evolves into that. With the PMPs become a kind of a set of signs that have meanings and relate vocabulary together and those sort of things on vowels, sort of thing. So anyway.
Super, thank you. Neeraj has asked, first of all, they say kinesthetic approaches are very interesting, and they wonder
No, they're not. Kinesthetic, no.
They also
okay. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, go ahead.
They also ask if how they can manage this technique if they teach large classes, so students of high, she said they say students of high number, which I presume to be a large class size.
You bet. I taught, in fact, I developed this in Japan with classes of 100, teaching pronunciation. So actually, to be honest with you, it's actually better in a big class, right? Because it's all, they're all moving together, they're doing these sort of things, and there's anonymity, and speaking. It makes, you know, class size is irrelevant here, except you got to be more than 6. You can't have too small a class because you have to have that social environment. But oh yeah, absolutely. I've done workshops for 450 people, piece of cake, right? All of them doing them, so sure.
That's an interesting point, Bill, though, I mean, about the small class sizes, because there may be people here that teach one-to-one or with small groups. Does that mean that maybe Haptic could be less successful with those smaller groups? What do you think? And to any of you?
Oh, that's a good question. In principle, I don't know. I mean, I do accent enhancement with just one person, but that's another deal, right? But the thing is that, as it goes back to our basic assumption here, is you learn, your pronunciation improves best. I mean, again, this research seems to all begin pointing around to it, by having to do it in public, because of developing the, you know, I mean, we used to think that the idea was to learn everything out of public view and then walk into public and perform. And again, that's psychology has come around in the last 30 years. That's not the way you do it. You know, that's not the way you overcome it. You overcome things by doing it, by moving into it. And our experience is that when you get about a group of 6, they're so supportive of each other, and after a while, the students help each other. You don't have to correct anything; they do it, and they do it very, you know, I don't know. And they're very engaged and very warmly supportive of each other. So, but no, I'm not saying a smaller group won't work. It will. I mean, but what happens is that person still has to use it in society. They have to use it in functioning, and you have to figure that out somehow. I just have a lot of difficulty when I work with individuals, and I get their pronunciation really rolling, but then they go back to work and they get back into their normal circumstances, and it doesn't carry over. So it's sort of like recidivism with prison, those sort of things. We see pronunciation the same way as a pronunciation instruction, particularly from our engaged this model that Amanda's presenting is a social, very much a social activity. Thoughts from that perspective?
Lots of people are looking for links to where they can find your videos. They want to go back and see the videos again. So if you could share your links, your references, your contact details, that would be super. I mean, you can do that after at the end of the questions if you prefer, and then you can do that before
it's on the
everyone
PowerPoint.
leaves.
All that information is on the PowerPoint.
It's on the PowerPoint. So if people download the PowerPoint, they'll get all of your contact details.
All there. It's
got
the
links to your videos.
Yeah, we have, like I have a website, Acton Haptic website that's got all they'll show you many of the models. You can see those for free. You can just go there and likewise, if you're really interested in this sort of thing, contact me. And I've got older materials that I give away for free. I'm not going to give away the new stuff, right? But I've got other where where you can see the videos free and you can do some of the training. One more thing too, the entire system, if you were to do the entire system, learn it all so you could become a haptician, as we say, it takes you about 3 months. And you got we've got a training program that you go through for about 12 weeks or so on, and you'll learn to do all the stuff so you can use all of them, but you don't need to, right? I mean, for your students, maybe they've got trouble with 3 vowels. All you need is just the PMPs for those vowels. Maybe you just want to work on, they just need to work on phrasing and syllables and stress and unstressed syllables and rhythm groups. That's easy. You saw me, in fact, you've got it already. You watched me do it. I gave you the butterfly. There it is, right? So you don't, and even the students don't have to learn everything. They could. When I do accent enhancement with these people who got money and a bad accent, right? With them, I train them in the entire system because we're really trying to come up with an adjustment to their identity and some other things involved. But for classroom teachers, it's just pick the tools. You don't have to do all of it. You have the very varying stages you can develop in that. So anyway, in the references, it'll take you to, we got 2 or 3 articles that are publicly available, give you the whole thing. Talk to you about everything we talked about here. And off my website, you can see video demos of me, unfortunately, but of me doing all of them to show you what they are about. And if you're more interested in it, get in contact with me and I'll give you some access to some free materials you can work with, things like that. So, and again, hopefully after the first of the year, the new stuff will be out, version 5.0 and all the other things. And anyway, like we say,
the name of your website, Bill?
That's just www.actonhaptic.com.
Bill, would you be able just for everybody to display that slide on the screen for a second? So if people can't catch it, they can take a screenshot of it.
Gotcha. We'll do. Here we go again. Hang on. Fasten your seatbelts. We're going to go to share here. Where is it?
I think our webmaster has also linked it into the chat box. So if you go to the chat box now, you'll also get a note of Bill's website.
Can everybody see that?
We can.
There's Bill. Here they're all 3. Amanda's here too. Amanda and Mike. There's me. But the one that there's it's actonhaptic.com has got the free videos. Got about a dozen videos, show you the basic videos of the system. And I have a blog like everybody else, like Mike does, and Mike's is more interesting than mine. Mine is just mostly goofy stuff. But if you want to know the kind of that's got about 1,200 blog posts on it, and it's got all kinds of stuff, research and game stuff like that, funny things like that. And the info at actonhaptic.com is you just contact me there or at Trinity Western University, either one, that's fine. And after the first of the year, a lot of this is going to go over to locals.com, Acton Haptic. And that's where I've got, I don't know how many students I've trained over the years, probably about 100 students that I've trained in haptic stuff. And a number of them and I are going to be forming like a haptic community with locals. And you'll hear more about that. Just like I say, just keep in touch. In fact, if you just go to the info at Acton Haptic, I'll put you on the mailing list, and I'll give you more emails than you want to see.
Bill, switch back to the other slide. Switch back to the reference list, the haptic one a bit more. Yeah, that one. There is in the PowerPoint, these links will be active, of course, but you'll see these are some of the open source papers Bill was mentioning.
All right, right.
So the articles are available too.
Yeah, the one that I did mention though is not. Is it here? The one of
No, the book chapter. No, the book chapter is not there. So just
okay.
email us if you want to know the book chapter about vocabulary and pronunciation. The Fight Club.
Yeah, that's the one that Mike had developed. Yeah, Mike and Amanda developed. Yeah.
Michael, if you could add that to the references to the slide, that would be great.
I will. Yeah, I can do that. It's just because it's a book chapter, it's not open source, so you actually have to email us. And the email address is probably, the email address is here. So maybe I think it's probably better just to email us directly.
Sure.
But I can add it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Now that book chapter Mike's talking about uses the Fight Club, which I demonstrated for you. And that one we've been using for learning vocabulary for years. I mean, there's a lot of different versions of it too that people do it without. They do it. In fact, they do that. Some people, believe it or not, do the Fight Club kinesthetically without haptic. But if I ever catch you doing that, you know, I cut you off. Just kidding. I would not cut you off.
That's super. So everyone, just keep an eye on our website. I'm going to give you the link to that in just a second. We'll make sure that the slides are available to you in the coming days. So keep an eye on the website, and of course, keep an eye on our social media as well, where we'll update you as to when these things become available. So we've come to the end of our session now. Just a huge thanks to Michael, to Amanda, and to Bill especially, who is up so late. He's joining us from Canada, and to all three of you for giving up your time on a Saturday to share with us and to share with all of our attendees. It's really fascinating stuff, and yes, I'm sure everyone has gotten a lot out of it. So huge thanks to you. Before you run away, everyone, attendees, some information for you. Lots of people have been asking if you can re-watch the webinar, and absolutely you can. So if you'd like to re-watch it, or if you'd like to share it with any colleagues or friends or students that you think would be interested, the recording will be available on our YouTube channel in approximately 48 hours or so. And I'm going to put the link, Beata, our webmaster, has already done it. She's popped the link to our YouTube channel in the chat box. So if you take a copy and paste that now, you'll be able to stream the video when it becomes available. All of our webinar recordings are stored on this YouTube page, so feel free to explore the resources that are freely available there for you. They also contain the opening and closing plenary of our most recent online conference, which was held just over 1 month ago, and that was on equality and inclusion in pronunciation teaching. So if you're interested in watching those, they're on our YouTube page. If you'd like to see the whole event, you can purchase access to it on our website, and I'll put that into the chat box now if you'd like some more information. Also, as we said, we'll share the slides on the website, so do check back in the coming days. If you don't follow us on social media, we would, of course, recommend it, as you can stay up to date on all of the latest PronSIG information. We'll also post when everything is uploaded and ready for you to watch again or to check out in your own time. And I will copy those links into the chat box for you now. If you attended the event live today, you are entitled to a certificate to prove that you were here in real time and participated. I'm going to give you and Beata, thank you so much. Beata, our webmaster, is 10 steps ahead of me already. She's popped the link to the certificate into the chat box there. This link is only available for 2 hours, so make sure you download a copy ASAP. And I should state very clearly, certificates are only available for those who are here and accessing this session live. It's not available for you if you are accessing this recording at a later date. If you're a Pro enthusiast, if you've enjoyed PronSIG's content this year or this webinar, and you're thinking about volunteering or doing some more in the pronunciation community, do get in touch with us. We're currently on the look for some social media assistants to join our webmaster, Beata Waleszak. And if you're a comfortable user of social media, and you enjoy communicating about pronunciation-related content to the wider community, please do get in touch ASAP. We're very, very interested in hearing from you, but the deadline for application does close in a couple of days. So if you'd like to get in contact with us, Beata has put the link in the chat box now. You can also email us, and I'm going to copy the email into the chat box as well. So drop us a line if you'd like to talk about that a little bit more. So finally, once again, huge thank you to our speakers today for this fantastic session. And of course, a huge thanks to you, our webinar participants. We're just delighted that we're able to share, that you're able to share your Saturday with us, especially if, like Bill, it's very, very late at night, or, you know, a Saturday evening like Amanda and Mike. So thank you for sharing your time with us today. This is actually PronSIG's last webinar of 2020. And it brings to the end what has been a stonkingly busy year for PronSIG. We have just been working flat out to bring you as much online content as we can. And we're so happy to see our community grow and to be delivering you these additional events. So we're now going to take a very well-deserved break and we'll be back in January with a brand new range of monthly webinars to bring in the new year. And we're going to post more information about that on our social media pages and on our website. So as I said, do follow us there, bookmark the page, and we'll keep you informed. And yeah, thank you once again, everyone. It was lovely to have you, and please do have a wonderful and relaxing rest of your weekend.
Yes, thank you very much, Bill, Michael, Amanda, and Happy New Year to everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Same to you. Thanks for having us. This was delightful. Great experience for us too. Thanks again.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Yes, do
Thank
come
you
back
very much.
again.
Will do. Bye.